Hey everybody, I'm Laurie Ruettimann. Welcome to the Rise of HXM, Human Experience Management. I'm joined as always by my co-hosts Minda Hartz and Lars Schmidt. And today we have a wonderful guest star on our show. It's Tanvi Gautam. Tanvi, how you doing?
Wonderful. I'm so excited to be here with all of you today.
Well, we're super happy to have you. Can you tell us all a little bit about you and where you're appearing from today?
Right. So I'm tuning in from Singapore, which is right at the equator. And the work that I do has to do with leadership in the age of disruption. So it's prime time right now for the work that I do. I also teach at the university here at Singapore Management University. And I'm a very, very passionate advocate of inclusion and diversity as well.
Great. We're lucky to have you today, especially because we're talking about the needs of employees in this age of productivity. This is really something that everybody's thinking about, especially as it pertains to the world of HXM. How do we balance the needs of employees, but also make sure we're not adding additional stress, additional pressures, and additional tension in their already complicated lives. So, Tanvi, I wonder if you can kick us off today and talk about how are corporations addressing the needs of employees and specifically making sure we don't add to the stress while being super aware that productivity is still an important metric?
Well, how are companies addressing the needs of employees? Let me begin by saying it's on a spectrum of inadequate to very badly. And the
Wait,
reason
wait, that's a terrible spectrum. I'm already out. I hate it.
I tell you the reason for that is because, historically, the relationship between employee well-being and workplaces has been fractured. And so we don't really have like a template to go by, so to speak, normally and more so in a pandemic, right? So the response has been ad hoc, inconsistent, I might even say reactive and siloed, and it
Mm.
leaves much to be desired. I mean, the fact that we are celebrating Google and Unilever because they said, hey, you can take Friday off. Well, employees have got more than 30 days plus of leave. They didn't take a summer vacation, probably won't be taking much of a Christmas break. I get that it's a symbolic gesture, but there is so much more that can be done to make sure that it's an integrated and strategic response to what we are dealing with.
Yeah, that certainly resonates with me. Minda, we're in this age of we're in this age of HXM, and it's more than just technology, but it's also technology. So talk to me about the lens of HXM and what employees can be and should be doing for their workforce to meet the needs.
Yeah, I love that question. And so I would say that right now we definitely have a unique opportunity because we're in like this science experiment, right? In the workforce, it's like the what's working, what isn't, and we really get a chance to be intentional right now. And I think in terms of HXM, I think that we can look at innovation, right? Is innovation thriving in this environment? We can look at the efficiencies. Are our procedures and our processes, do those really meet the demands of the future of work? And I think also, me by now, communication, that piece, are we communicating in the ways that work for everybody? And so I really do believe that having tools, workplace tools to solve some of those issues are really imperative right now.
Yeah, super well said. Lars, take us through what you're seeing in terms of some of the technology solutions out there. I mean, many of us are working remotely. Many of us are working in home studios that really are not meant to be home studios. So, what are some of the solutions out there to make us better, more communicative, more productive? What do you see?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that there's so many, when you look across the landscape of HXM right now, there's an incredible amount of tools, whether it is, communication tools like Zoom, whether it's nudging tools that are prompts for managers to, check in. I know we've covered that on the show as well. But I think it's also a matter of looking at anti tools in some way, which is maybe a contrarian view on a show about HXM. But I think allowing employees to have some boundaries from time to time, and you're seeing more companies have things like, no Zoom Friday or whatever, no meeting X day, where it's just you're understanding that, especially for people that have shifted from an office to remote, they're carrying a lot right now. And so if you can create some buffers and some spaces for them to be able to do deep work, and or no work, have some time and some space. I think that ultimately they're going to be more engaged and more productive in the long run. And we really have to be mindful of not, overworking our employees who are already stressed out given all things 2020.
Yeah, I like that perspective a whole lot. And I like the kind of contrarian approach that you take. And Tanvi, I wonder if you can expand on that and talk about some of the downstream effects that are most profound on our workforce, whether it's productivity, connection, collaboration, culture, retention, all the buzzwords, right? Things are happening downstream when we make decisions. So can you share your thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is
so
E all of the above an acceptable answer? I think, look, honestly, that's true. And I think the challenge, especially for HR right now, is that, you have an organization made up of individuals, and every one of those individuals is experiencing all of those things you mentioned in a different order, right? I think most of them are experiencing all of them to some extent, some, more, some lesser, but all of them are experiencing all of those things at some extent. And that makes it really hard, but also really important, I think, for HR to, leverage their own intuition and HXM tools to really understand how they can support and meet those employees where they are, because it's all different, and that's part of what makes, I think, this moment in time, particularly for the field of HR and people operations, so challenging because it's so very nuanced.
Lars, I love how passionate you are on that. Thank you so much. And Tanvi, I'd love to get your take on that as well. So what do you see as the downstream effects?
So I'm always with Lars when it comes to contrarian thinking. So let me just say that I think that there is an overload of tools available right now to our employees. We're trying to be supportive, but previously, if I had to get a message across, I might check my mail, but now I'm checking mail and Slack and LinkedIn and WhatsApp and the ping and the everything that's
Wait, are you
happening all
looking
at
for
the
smoke signals in the sky too? Because I sometimes do that. I just want to throw that in there. Like, we are over communicated. I 100% agree with you. So talk to me a little bit about like the human psychology of this, right? Because it's exhausting.
Yeah, it is exhausting. And the part that worries me most is that collaboration and belonging, it needed attention pre-COVID as well. And the way I think about it is, the toxic managers or the managers who didn't know how to craft a human experience, just because they have access to technology doesn't mean overnight they're going to morph into people managers or stop micromanaging. In fact, I think it might amplify some of those behaviors, because now they're trying to keep up on so many different platforms and at so many different places. So my worry is that some of the behavior, answering the question about psychology, may actually go from bad to worse, because people are feeling pushed against the wall and they want to show that they are leading, and that's kind of making them more reactive versus saying, no, we don't need so many tools. Let's agree, what do we want to work on as a team, and align with that and get things done.
Really good stuff. Minda, close us out on this. I mean, the downstream effects are profound, but we talk about employee populations as general populations, and each and every one of us is different, right? So I wonder what you see as some of the downstream effects out there.
Yeah, for me, I think there's two actually, but one is more so along the communication and the connectivity, because I worry about the social connectivity in terms of where we are right now, because yes, we are over communicating in many ways, but one thing we're not doing is maybe asking the right questions. And recently I was doing some research, and I found that 40% of employees that are now working from home, they only have what they need to do their job, right? So maybe we're not asking the right questions of, do you have what you need just because you have the Slack, just because you have the Zoom, but are those really the things you need to do your job? But on the other side of that is the social connectivity. And even though I wouldn't call it socializing, but we're working, on the screen and doing video conferencing, but what about mimicking those social interactions that we'd have in the break room or in the hallway? Those aren't the things that are happening as often. And how do you continue to build your social capital if you're not having those organic interactions? So for me, I think it's really important for us to focus on, yes, the work is very important, the productivity, but also how are we creating those social interactions outside of meetings? So maybe it's a Google Hangout that just stays open all day as the break room, right? So I think that it's really important for us to also not forget about that part of work.
Oh, really good stuff. I see you nodding your head, Tanvi. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'm noticing things like people are actually scheduling the virtual hour post work to kind of get together and we are seeing things like teams coming together to do Zumba together. Okay. And I heard one of the chief HR officers tell me, I didn't even know we had a Zumba instructor in the team, right? So some of it is happening, like people are trying to discover each other beyond just their roles, because I think to Minda's point, they are craving that interaction with their teams. So I'm also noticing that some organizations are taking the lead in crafting those spaces where you can open up a little bit more. One of the companies that is my client, they did like come and take a tour of my home. So you went in your yard and you said, well, here's my yard and here's my dog and here's my so some of that is happening, but we could certainly do with more of it.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. Lars, we're not going to do Zumba together anytime soon. I'm sorry to disappoint you, my friend,
And I can dream. I'm not giving up hope, Laurie.
Yeah, maybe next year, maybe next pandemic, we'll get to Zumba status in our friendship. But I want to talk to you a little bit about the research that's out there with organizations and specifically the research around employee well-being. I wonder if you can talk to us about the research because you have so many good conversations with CHROs, and I know well-being is top of mind right now.
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways to look at this. I think well-being is certainly top of mind. I think, you asked me kind of my perspective from the progressive CHRO or CPO perspective. Yeah. They don't need the research to tell them that well-being is important, right? And I think that maybe that is a bit of a difference from legacy-oriented HR leaders to progressive, or they understand, and it's just a given that employees that feel safe and supported and engaged and heard are going to be more productive, and they're going to be happier, and they're going to stay longer, and they're going to be more impactful. And so I think that there's this, if you go back to kind of legacy versus modern, legacy so often had to look at research to validate strategy without necessarily just having, an intuition around like, this is the right thing to do. It's the right thing for our people. It's what they need. And so, I think modern operators, yes, research is important. And there's certain topics that, clearly you want to validate with data. I'm not, diminishing that. But I think as it relates to like why we should prioritize well-being and why we should, create programs that enhance that, that's just understood. So leaning on kind of research or data to help them land at that decision, I think is just not something they really think about.
That's real interesting because back when I worked in HR, we would say, oh, we need to research how expanded family leave will impact the organization. But what we really meant was we just had to figure out how much it costs, right? Yeah. Like that was it. Research was really a code word for budget and the impact on money. So right. Minda, I want to pivot to you for a second because you're in this world where you're researching the employee experience. And I wonder if you can talk about what you're seeing in terms of research, in terms of the things that impress you, or maybe even just your general opinion on this word research when it comes to well-being.
Yeah, I have to echo your sentiments, Laurie. It means that we may or may not have the budget to do that. But to Lars's point, we know that people are experiencing, more mental health issues right now than they have any other time, maybe in our lifetime. And so I know for the African American community in particular, they're experiencing 40% more mental health challenges than they did before COVID-19. And so I think it's really important for us to understand that, yes, not everybody is experiencing the pandemic the same either. But what I will say, some of the things that have impressed me, because I feel like mental health, physical health are all part of the employee experience. And Starbucks, for example, I know that they've given all of their employees 20 complimentary therapy sessions for the year. And I think those are the type of moves that companies need to make sure that, at least everybody may not be on the therapy train, but it's available if you want it, right? And so I think that companies need to invest in that way. And so those are some of the things that I'm seeing that, are showing it's not just the rhetoric, but it's actually the action.
You know, I love that you brought up that Starbucks example. There was a US presidential candidate named Andrew Yang, and part of his platform was that all Americans should have access to therapy and couples therapy. It should be part of our healthcare program. And I believe that just in corporate America, like every employee needs to be in therapy, but that's another HXM discussion for another day. Tanvi,
After hours conversation.
we'll get some wine. We'll drink about how we all need therapy. Tanvi, I want to hear from you because you're really immersed in this world of research academia. You understand the issues around well-being. Can you talk to us a little bit about the research and well-being and what you see and your perspective?
Right. So let me take you back to when I transitioned from the corporate world to academia, right? And one of the things, and so I'm talking of like more than 15 years ago, one of the things that really shocked and surprised me was the gap in research and literature on looking at managing emotions in the workplace. Historically, we have looked at emotions as something that needs to be kept out, must be shut out. It interferes with decision making. Remember the rational economic man model that we have been running our workplaces on. And so a lot of the research and theory and models are all built upon systems of efficiency management, not systems of emotion management. And the world that we are living in right now, our emotions are front and center. Our employees are dealing with, trauma of caregiving. They're dealing with, losing their loved ones that are living in other countries that they can't even turn up at their funerals. I don't need ROI and research to tell me we need to show up for our people. And, I can't say that academia has always been at the forefront of leading the revolution, but I think all of us here doing HXM get it, and we'll make sure that the employees actually get taken care of.
That's a really good perspective. I wonder, Lars, if you can talk a little bit about this. What employers can do to support the health and well-being of their employees if we're not building a business case, Lars? What do we do, and how do we make it from a conceptual idea that just feels good to an actual strategy?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that there's lots of ways to approach this, and Starbucks is a great example of a tangible step one company is making. I mentioned before, no Zoom Fridays. To Tanvi's point, companies that close down. Twitter is doing this now, where they're shutting down and taking more days off outside of scheduled holidays or things like that, or vacation days. That they're just saying everybody can be off and everybody has more flex time to just take off, right? Because I think that they realize that employees need that space. You're starting to see even more programs like, some companies I've been reading some studies about companies that have been sending some of their HR team to, mental health, like emergency type training so that they can actually be better positioned to support employees in crisis, right? Like that's not their job. Typically HR isn't, we're not necessarily equipped for some of the things that we're dealing with right now, some of the traumas that our employees are facing right now. So they're taking the steps to do that. Headspace, right? Lots of companies are offering free Headspace accounts for employees that want to practice mindfulness as a way to cope. Unilever recently created, I think they sent 62,000 employees through a mental health resiliency training, like a multi-week training program about developing resiliency in employees. So, those are high investment, high effort programs, a day off here and there, flex time, Zoom, that's the other end of the spectrum. But the point is that there's a lot of options that employers can have if they want to take this more seriously and really, make some of these tangible commitments to their employees.
Before we pivot to the rest of the panel, I just wanted to ask you a question because it feels like we are going through a really weird time in our lives, right? And we're grasping at straws. We've got all of these different resources and we're picking and choosing tools and technologies. And if we're not really embodying the world of HXM, if we're not measuring this, right? If we're not seriously monitoring outcomes, we're never going to learn anything. And so I worry that we're not doing that. And I also worry that we're just constantly immersed in this chaos and we're not taking a step back and looking at some of these tools with a discerning eye. That is all coming from me very viscerally. But Lars, before I pivot to anybody else, can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's a valid point. I think one thing that I'm seeing more of companies do is they're doing a lot more surveying and listening on an ongoing and regular basis to actually understand. One of the things, if you want to understand, what your employees want and need, ask them, right? There's so much stuff out there. It's so easy to get like to, be chasing shiny objects and be like, oh, I'm going to roll out this tool. Cool. Nobody wants it. Nobody asked for it. Nobody has time to use it. So I think, with HXM, there's so many options out there, which is amazing. As a tech geek, I get excited about that. But if you're not calibrating that to what your employees actually want and need, you can be wasting a lot of time. So to me, the best practice for that is survey frequently, often, make it lightweight. Don't make it, tons of questions, but understand exactly what your employees need and understand how they're using the tools that you're bringing, what works, what doesn't, so that you can adapt and adjust, and don't just, throw a bunch of stuff on their plate because you think they need it without actually engaging them to find out if they really do.
Really good stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Actually,
Tanvi. You are nodding your head. Let's get you in on this.
Yeah, because there's some interesting research that I saw, and I agree with Lars. I rarely disagree with him, is that they did collect data on utilization of some of the systems that were being made available to employees. And what was seen in that research, and this was Asia-based research, right, was that 60% of the employees were suffering from depression, anxiety, stress, but only 4% of them were actually utilizing some of the systems that were being made available to them. So I think we have to be very careful about not adopting this, we will build it and they will come. That's not how it works. And sometimes you have to drop beneath the surface of technology and ask yourself, is there something happening culturally within the organization that people are either not feeling safe to access these spaces? Is there, some sort of, stigma associated with being someone who actually ended up, using this app or downloading it? There needs to be a deeper investigation. So I think the utilization piece and being responsive to the end user has got to be paramount.
Really interesting. Before we pivot to Minda, I just want to follow up on that, because it's not only if we build it, they will come. I want to say to modern HR departments, in leadership teams, be patient. A meditation app is not going to solve COVID-related depression. What solves that is something bigger that work cannot deliver. I mean, we believe in the promise of HXM, but I also believe in therapeutics and vaccines, and that's what solves COVID, not telling someone to meditate for 10 minutes a day. So Tanvi, can you react to that? Because sometimes I think we put too much pressure on the enterprise.
Yeah, so it's not just meditation, right? So there are, for example, a lot of helplines have opened up where they have got clinical psychologists on call, in multilingual psychologists who you can call sometimes 24/7, but the calls are not happening. And let me caveat it by saying that this is an Asia-based perspective that I'm giving you, right? And there is a huge amount of, is my job under threat? If I end up using something that somebody might be tracking, will it be seen as I'm already crumbling and hence my job is at risk, right? And so we need to delve a little bit deeper into what is going on. And one of the suggestions there is maybe you want to start a little bit slowly. Maybe you want to start with conversations and therapy around, I don't know, weight loss and time management, and then move to the slightly more sensitive topics. Because it's not like just because you've created the helpline that people will just pick it up and be part of it. So, we need to kind of take a slightly more fine-grained view of this, and rather than just providing the resources, saying what will make it easier. And I completely agree. There is a runway to this. It's not like everybody's downloaded an app and now I don't have to worry about the mental health of people.
Right. Good. That's absolutely accurate. And I agree with you 100% on a lot of those points. Minda, take us home for the episode today. I mean, we've talked about a lot of stuff, technology, employee well-being, productivity. What are your thoughts as we end this discussion today about all things employees and their needs?
Yeah, I love this. I was actually just taking mental notes, but I think the one thing maybe that we haven't touched enough on, in my opinion, is the managers and the models in which are sustainable for the future of work. And what I mean by that is, prior to us going into this remote environment, many managers felt like, oh, you can't do your work from anywhere, right? And now managers are rethinking those models, right? And having to be more flexible. There's a report that said that 70% of managers now consider remote working as more productivity is happening, right? So I think, companies can really think about the technology. How do we create a sustainable workforce that allows for a hybrid model? And so I think that part of the wellness and the well-being of employees is understanding what type of work they want to do and what environments and hours and some of those things. And I think that's part of our mental health, right? Asking the right questions in terms of, do you like working from home? Do you want to work 3 days a week instead of, 5 days a week? And I think factoring that into it, because I think that that's part of the employee experience. Because also another fact is that 75% of people feel as though, or stat, I should say, 75% of people feel as though they've been more productive being at home. And so how can we balance, some of the productivity individually and collaboratively?
Really good. I could talk about this for hours and also, probably descend into cynicism for hours, but I love where we've ended it on a positive note. And I want to thank everybody today for being here. Tanvi Gautam, thank you for being our special guest today. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having invited me.
Yeah. And Lars, Minda, as always, it was really great to see you.
Likewise.
Yeah, great. And everybody, we discuss these topics and more at all different opportunities. And one of the opportunities that we've had to recently talk about productivity, well-being, is SAP and SuccessFactors Success Connect. And we're going to include a link to all the different sessions below in the comments so you can go back and learn more about these topics that are important to us and important to you. And as always, thanks for watching the Rise of HXM Human Experience Management. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.